G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Kris, Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
Hello and welcome along to season 3 of the Big Breakdown podcast, where we're looking at coaching skills, and today we are looking at activity structure in individual sports. Harrison, we've got a great guest on today, and also someone who's got his own podcast as well.
Yes, yeah, and a golfer. So I think a little bit selfish of you getting a golfer on just to try and get some free lessons out of your poor swing. I know that he's over COVID, he started doing more remote lessons. So this is just, I guess, over the next hour, it's a CPD for Kris Stafford on his poor swing.
We think so, but I think even to fix my swing, you need to be here, and no, we can't afford to fly more. That's just too much.
Just a little bit.
I'm looking forward to see what I can learn that might help improve my practice when I go to the range, because I am actually very much self-taught and very much not very good at golf. So,
yeah. I think it will be an extremely interesting chat. I think a lot of rugby can be broken down into individual skills, and if we can improve our way of coaching individuals rather than just the team, then that'll make us all stronger coaches.
Exactly. So today we are joined by Jay Carter. Jay is the national golf coach at Golf New Zealand. Jay works with players of all levels, from beginners right the way through to elite players, and he's passionate about golf and wants to share his passion with like-minded people regardless of their ability. Jay is also the host of the Talking Performance podcast, where he discusses all things performance and interviewing people who are living a high-performance world, with guests such as Wayne Smith and Laura Langman. Jay joins us today to chat about activity structure in individual sports. Jay, how are you?
Very good, mate. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, no, it'd be good. Thank you for coming on. So this is sort of a follow-up from our last episode where we've looked at activity sports for coaching teams, and now we're looking at more individual sports. I suppose just from your experience, what do you think the main differences could be from someone working within a team sport environment to working in more of an individual sport such as golf?
Yeah, good question. I guess probably the difference, I guess there's individual components within team sports, like players have their own work-ons or skill sets that they're trying to develop. And then I would almost think in an individual sense, there is a team element to it, particularly in golf. We have one player, but a whole team of people around the player that need to communicate and try and get on the same page. But if you think about, obviously rugby, you've got a couple of those closed, or I guess what would be deemed as closed skills with the kicking and line out throwing. And then I guess cricket, it's a team sport, but it's a whole lot of individuals. And I think it's probably one thing I really enjoy actually is the team aspect of coaching, when it's about relationship building and the sum of the parts, trying to produce a better outcome than the part itself.
What's your sort of initial startup? So if someone comes, because I know you do as well as the national stuff, as well as sort of amateur golfers as well, don't you? Sort of within the
yeah.
What's that process start like? If someone comes to you from that first process, the first one to start being coached by you, what's the initial process you would start with in a way to sort of try and understand what then you can do within the actual activities?
Yeah, right. The start off for me is a coffee and a yarn, and get to know them and get to know what they want to get out of it. As you can probably gather, I don't mind having a yarn. So, but I think it's a good place to start. Get a sense of, what somebody wants to get out of it, what they want to put in. Do they understand what they're saying that they want? Is it what they want? I'm not a massive fan of the quick fix, silver bullet, which in golf, I guess traditionally golf's largely instruction, or historically has been instruction. And I probably don't prescribe to that so much, where, I'll video Tiger Woods' swing and then I'll video your swing and I'll compare the differences and say, you need to do what Tiger does. But I think those days now they're gone in terms of, I think we've got a better understanding, but I'm not sure that golf has quite got rid of that yet. It's an easy thing to do is to watch YouTube and have a look online as to what the latest 3 things are that are going to make me hit the ball 30 yards further. But it's all just, it's all smoke and mirrors, I think. So getting an understanding of who's in front of you, what they want, do they expect to get that 30-meter gain? Sometimes you can get, sometimes people will have a concept that's not quite right, and you can say, oh, look, if you try this, this will happen. And you can get those quick wins, but normally it's like every other skill. It takes time. It's ugly. You have to put a whole lot of work in. You don't get immediate results. And reality is not too many people are willing to go through that. Most people just want to come to the golf pro, pay their money, and be fixed. And so that's a real challenge, I think, for our industry, is to go, I'm not going to fix you. I can't fix you.
It's quite interesting because I'm fully self-taught golf, and I'm not great. I can hack my way around. I'm probably a pro golfer's nightmare, but I do want lessons. But the problem that I don't want to just have the one lesson to have that, like you say, that quick fix. If I'm going to do it, I want to invest in it. So it's just, and it's that finance to put in towards it to be able to do it. Because someone said, why don't you just have a lesson? But I just don't want to go for a one lesson to stop me from hitting it to the right. If I'm going to do it, I want to make sure that I'm going to work on the whole aspect of my game. Because the swing that you would do from a drive, it looks completely different to how you want to chip onto the green. So you want to make sure there's no point being able to hit it long and straight off the tee if then your next shot hits the green is going to end up in the water to the right. Yeah, exactly right. And understanding that, and it is a long process, and it's, most of us in any sport that we do, we tend to have a fairly good idea of what we're doing wrong or what we need to improve on. But just because we know, like I'll often say to people, do you play the guitar? And most people say no. And I said, look, if I showed you 3 chords on the guitar and played a 3-chord song, do you think you could play it? And they went, no, of course not, because why not? I'd need to practice. But they think just because you tell them that what to do on their golf swing, that all of a sudden they're going to magically be able to do it. So we don't expect it in too many other parts of our life, that just because we know how to do something, we'll be able to transfer that. And as a coach, that can be frustrating, I think. And to try and get that point across.
Yeah, and do you find? I think when I guess it's different for Kris and I with our experiences working within in kind of team sports, and like you say, there are some elements of close skill. But what's the kind of common theme? Speaking with coaches throughout all of the podcasts that we've done, is this idea of the athlete and the person first. So when you've got a team, and you've almost got a team surrounding the athlete rather than the team surrounding the coach. If you get what I'm coming from there, how is it building that relationship and that rapport, and especially if you're working with like multiple individual athletes, how have you found kind of tapping in and almost adjusting your coaching of skills and what you can bring to the individual athlete?
Yeah, I think that's a critical point. I mean, the first thing is you're employed by them, so you've got to, what are they, and it becomes a needs and wants. What do they want? What do they need? And they don't always align, those two things. So I think having that trust equity from a relationship point of view makes some of those critical conversations a bit easier. If they trust you and they know that you're coming from a place of care and love, then you can probably be a little bit more critical. So yeah, I think the first part of that is trying to build that rapport through just the way we do with most interactions, get an understanding of what their beliefs are, what their philosophies are. Do they align with what yours are? Because that's one thing I would say, a lot of people do want that quick fix, or to be told, explicitly what to do. And sometimes as a coach, you have to say, oh, I might not be the guy for you. There might be a coach down the road who might be better suited to you.
And have you done that before in terms of the experience of that?
Yeah. I had a guy who's a top player, and what he wanted and what I thought he needed didn't align. And we were doing some work, and I said to him, look, I think, I said to him, I think we need to change the way you train. I think you train way too safe. There's not enough pressure. It's not representative to what happens on the golf course. I'd love to put you under some stress by doing X, Y, and Z. And he's a good mate and still is, and has been for years and years. And he looked at me and he said, if you do that, I'll probably knock you out. And I said to him, that's perfect, because that's the same behavior that you display on the golf course. You get that angry when you're playing. So you need to be practicing in that state, because that's part of your skill development. Is, it's not just what you think you need to do from a motor skill point of view. It's all this emotional stuff. So the fact that you do want to knock me out is probably the perfect place to practice from. But then he said, look, I guess, and we just agreed that, he more said, I don't want to knock you out, and I don't want to feel like I want to knock you out. So we just sort of went, let's agree to disagree. And then from time to time since then, so I went from sort of being a coach to probably just someone that he would ask for technical advice on his swing, which I'd happily give because he was a mate, but he would know that that's not how I want to roll. And so we have had, there's been times when it has clashed, and he was, obviously, well, not obviously, but he was a top player.
And in terms of creating those pressure environments for us, so like, once again, for us in team, we can pull players together, we can have competitions, and we can really get them firing, and almost turn some of them against each other just to see how they react. With like, when you're working with one golfer, do you bring another golfer in and make it a challenge that way, or would you just kind of try and set them competition tasks based, whilst just doing one-to-one kind of stuff with them?
Yeah, so bit of both. You can do most of it one-to-one. Set the standards pre-session. Golf's an incredibly frustrating sport anyway, and most of that emotional control is part of the issue.
I think Kris can tell you that.
Yeah, so it doesn't take too much to get people. It is funny. I was having a chat with a guy the other day. You see growing humans get incredibly angry and irrational on a golf course, which you don't tend to see in too many other sports. Like, I think if you're cooking at home and you forgot something, you wouldn't pick the frying pan up and whack it against your oven. But in golf, we have this really bizarre, I don't know what it is that just draws some real, bad stuff out of us. So it's quite easy to create that in practice as well. And the other one is, almost everybody has a fear of failure and a fear of judgment. So you can just put some parameters around that, and that usually puts people under a bit of heat.
I think a lot of that comes down to it, and it does. It's more the I see it from, especially with my own golf, is one time I can go and play and I'll be absolutely, wow, this is the best I've ever played, and then I'll play a week later and not be able to hit a thing. And I think that's where the frustration comes through. You can't just, it's kind of, you can't judge yourself on your last shot. You've just got to go on what you're going to do next and try and get yourself into that process where you can actually just consistently, and I think when you speak to a lot of golfers, it is all about consistency. That's all they want. They just want to be able to consistently hit it, at least avoiding water or trees. I'm great at trees in our place. I can tell you which one. But I think it comes down to consistency. So what would your, so obviously there's only so much from a course management perspective you can do at the range, for example. Is the majority, do you mix between the technique work on the range and then put that into practice on course, or is it how do you find that balance, and what process do you go through as a coach while the players are going through that experience? Yeah, so the big one there is that it's a really fine line, because you get high repetition on the range, which you don't get on the course. Like a par 4, most of the guys I coach and girls I coach hit 2 shots and 2 putts, and it takes 15 minutes. So you kind of, like from a time on task thing, it's not a lot. So you've got to do a fair amount of work on the range, but I love the repetition without repetition framework. Not just hitting
7-iron over and over again. And I'm sure you've heard the analogy before, but and actually RJ may have even said it when he chatted with you guys about that. You know, if you just keep getting asked the same maths question all the time, you just keep giving the same answer, you're not really learning. And golf practice, for the most part of what I see, is on a driving range mat where everything in the driving range is perfectly linear. The mat's set up perfectly. It's going straight down the range. You've got a 6-iron. It's always a perfect lie. Whereas when you get on the course, the greenkeepers put the tees on a funny angle and you stand up and think, man, these tees are aiming at the trees. That's weird. That messes with my head. So you have to be really clear about what you're doing. If you are going to go to the range to practice, you have to be really clear about what you're going to do. So in an ideal world, I'd love to be on the course more. And I think if we went back and started golf again and driving ranges again, I reckon they would be more representative of golf courses than open blocks rugby fields. They're basically like a few rugby fields, right? And some of those things like Top Tracer and Top Golf have helped with that. But I think getting out on the course is the ultimate thing. And you can do heaps of things, like you talk about improving consistency. You can go and play 2-ball, worst ball, you know, where you hit 2 shots and take your worst one and then go from there and hit 2 shots and take your worst one. And that can help shape some of your decision making. And but I guess for me, as a rugby player, as a kid, I played rugby up until I think it's 27, the final time that I stopped playing. I gave up a few times, but as a kid, I didn't really like contact. So I played first 5, so it was a relatively safe place to play if you didn't like contact in those days. But then at training on Tuesday night, the coach would bring the tackle bags in, and I'd run at the tackle bag, man, and I'd smash it, and you know, like pick it up and drop it, and my tackle technique would be fine. And then come Saturday, some big dude would run at me, and I'll be running the other way. And then Tuesday would roll back around and the coach would go, Jay, your tackling's not very good. Let's get the tackle bags out. But it was the most unrepresented. Of course, I can tackle a pillow. Like, you know, that's nothing like what you're asking me to do on Saturday. And I find golf the same. So the more representative training can become, I love rugby and spend a bit of time around rugby coaches and watching. And I am fascinated by some of the stuff. I know you can't be full contact all the time. But I think in golf and rugby, the more representative the environment is to the actual game, the higher the learning is. And tackling a tackle bag or hitting on a driving range is, once you get to a point, it's a waste of time.
I do think that I 100% agree with what you're saying there. I think there are times and places in which, you know, the driving range and tackle bags are useful, but I think where us as coaches, we need to be quite clear with the players and outline the reasons for why we're on the driving range, we're using tackle shields, and say, look, this isn't representative, but this enables us to do technical tweaks. So we can then, the next progression on that skill or that learning within the session is then to go onto a golf course or to tackle a big 20 stoner running at you. So therefore, as long as you're clear and you know, and you're quite you know, honest with the player, I think that's where you'll see benefits there. So I don't think I think, would you agree?
Yeah. Yep. To a point, I think there's a he's a golf coach, but 3D biomechanist over your way called Mark Bull. And he's a bit of a guru, but he'll talk about, before we've even started to think about moving, one of the early influences on that is what we perceive in that environment. So I think about there, you know, like when I stand on a driving range, what am I perceiving when I'm about to catch a ball at first 5 with no defenders? What am I perceiving? Nothing. So the skill gets layered, and if I can catch it in training every time, and I can nail a tackle bag and technique, and then come the game I can't tackle, so you pull me back to the tackle bag, I would say that the cues, somehow the cues I'm getting, I'm missing perceptual cues. So you'd actually need someone running at me, or so the first thing is, what are you perceiving in this environment that's changing when we're on a tackle bag or when we're on a driving range? So it could be in golf, like out of bounds on the right. And then goes back to that trust equity from a player's point of view. They're only going to be open and honest with you if they know, like no player really wants to say, man, I'm shit scared of hitting it out of bounds here or 3-putting. And they'll only do that if they know you've got their trust. And then at that point, you can start having conversations. I mean, like for me, sorry.
No, go on.
Oh, like I played in the New Zealand Open and stood on the first tee, which is, like a professional event. I stood on the first tee as a 19-year-old and I froze. I literally couldn't move. And people think that when I say that I was exaggerating, but I literally forgot how to move. It's the weirdest thing. And after that week, obviously I missed the cut, but went back to my coach, and the first thing we did was went to the range. And I remember thinking, mate, I can't, like, of course I know how to hit it, but in that moment, there's a whole lot of stuff going into my brain that's forced my technical shutdown. So the attempted intervention was technique, but man, I knew it wasn't.
But
and I'm assuming that's,
Yeah, no, that goes down to sort of how we process it within our brain of what we want to do. When we overthink it, we tend to overcomplicate the movement, and that's when it goes. It's which masters stuff on implicit and explicit learning. When we overthink and we engage the working memory, then we're more likely to not maybe execute as well as we could do. And that is a common thing I hear when I'm chatting to golfers. As an example, is your second shot is always better than your first one, because your first one, you've got really right, I need to hit here, I need to do this, I need to think of this. And you hit it and it goes miles to the right and it goes out of bounds, and you're like, and the next one you just get up and you don't think, you just leather it and it goes straight down the middle. Yeah. It's trying to get into that process for each shot, isn't it? It's a process of how you prepare. You're not thinking so much on the technique. You trust you've got the technique and you try and focus on just hitting the ball.
Yeah. And, you're right. There is a place for the technique. And our sports psychologist that we use with Golf New Zealand, David Galbraith, who I used to do the podcast with, he talks about getting to that effort moment, which you just talked about, where you're just like, oh, who cares? I'm just going to hit it. And he said a challenge for golfers is to get to that moment on the first tee. Normally we can do it when we've got off to a rough start and we're 3 over our handicap after 3 holes, and we just think, oh, who cares? I'll just hit it. I'll just play now. And then all of a sudden, boom, it comes back. So I think there's a thing of, like, I talk to players about having high standards. So know your technique, know your smacks, know your habits, high standards, low expectations, and then high acceptance. So SEA obviously makes the acronym C. So yeah, I think it's critical to go, because when people go, I have low expectations, I think, like you're talking about there, often with that, we lower our standards. But the critical part, I think, is to keep our standards really high, understand our technical cues and what we need to do, keep those standards high, but with complete expectations that anything could happen. So really lower those expectations, and then high acceptance of what happened. So then the next time you get to your shot, high standards, low expectations, high acceptance, and it makes life a bit easier. I think about Aaron Cruden. I don't know if you remember this, but the All Blacks played Ireland, I don't know how long ago it was now, maybe 5 years ago. And I think it was before they'd lost to Ireland. And in the last minute of the game, they scored in the corner. And I think it was either tie or maybe be 1 behind. And Aaron Cruden came out, took the kick from the sideline, and he missed it, but one of their players charged the kick. So he got to have another kick. And people said to me, God, I remember having a conversation with people, that must have been hard, because he just missed it. He would have been all negative. I was like, no, that would have been easy, because he's just accepted that he could miss it. Like, to me, that's the perfect outcome. Now we can, I know what happens if I miss. I know the feeling I'm going to have and what I did. So it's almost like that. I hit it out of bounds. Oh, bang, now just do it. So I think that expectation management is actually the most critical thing in golf.
I remember reading something that I think New Zealand forwards used to do it within rugby. So I talk about it with hookers in rugby union and goal kickers that I might work with, because I think it's, I know I've worked with plenty of hookers that will throw a ball in the line out and it'll be absolutely terrible, and then I know for the rest of the game that throw is playing on their mind, because they haven't managed to just get to that effort, that moment of effort. And so they're trying to tweak every technique on every throw, and it's an overcorrection or it's an undercorrection, and it's just not right. I think I remember reading that they'd encourage the New Zealand forwards to think of the blue sky, and that'd be their reset. So they're not thinking of anything else at that moment apart from the color of the sky that they're playing. So they just get to that moment, that effort moment of just everything's just chilled. There's they're not thinking of, oh, this is the last throw of the World Cup final, I need to nail it. All they're thinking about is the color of the sky. I thought that was so kind of profound that, that in that moment of high pressure, they're just looking at the sky and thinking it's madness.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Yeah, I think how have you found trying to coach that psychological aspect to individual athletes or players or athletes that you're working with? Because I know that internal demons can be a massive crux to performing regular high performance skills.
Yeah. I guess going back to that original one of you need to understand the person. So let's assume we've got that. Then I think it's about probably you and them being quite open and vulnerable about what it's going to take and what's required. And I think, like I'd have to know someone quite well, but when I feel like when someone has technique as a crutch, or someone's really fascinated by technique or think technique's everything, I just think it's a crutch for them. And I'll explain that. And because it's easy to go, my swing wasn't on today, so therefore it's almost like it's not my fault. I'm going to abstain from any responsibility here. It's almost like, like I can use that as my excuse. So I'll do like thinking about your hooker throwing in, like people that are fascinated with technique. I'd say to them, could you hit your target? Like let's play around today at training and get the number 4 jumping, and you've got to throw it with one hand. Can you hit your target? And now you've got to throw it from passing it down here. Can you hit your target? And what you'll find with highly skilled athletes is it actually doesn't matter what their technique is, they will be able to complete the skill. Obviously, the better technique is, the more likely it is to stand up under pressure. That's our belief anyway. But for the most part, I reckon if you took all the Six Nation hookers, they could probably throw it in backwards over their head that way and still be pretty accurate with their target. Think about a cricketer, like those top batsmen. They could probably hit the ball through the covers from anywhere. Like ideally, they'll get a ball pitched up outside off stump and hit a cover drive. But if you said to them, you have to get it through cover and the ball's on your hip, they'll work out a way to do it. And so I think that's a lovely way to break down for people who are really using technique as a crutch to go, mate, you can still complete this task. You don't need to have your best technique. So I try and do that a little bit in golf to get people away. And then it's about, what's driving that? What is it that you truly want? People will say, I really just want to unleash. I just want to be able to hit my driver with confidence and I don't even care where it goes. And then you'll say, okay, so if you hit your driver with confidence down this hole and it goes out of bounds, will you be angry? Like, yeah. So you do care where it goes. So what you're telling me is you want to unleash with the guarantee that it's going to go straight. Well, which is fine. Don't bullshit me and say you just want to unleash, because if you just want to unleash, you won't care where it goes. And that's where I reckon we have to train to get to that moment. So I challenged a player the other day, a professional player. We were talking about ways to make more, create a bit more pressure in the environment. And I said to her, and I find top athletes tend to not shirk the workload, right? They don't mind putting hours of practice in. So you can say to them, if you don't complete this task, then you've got to do 50 press-ups. They just go, sweet, that's good, 50 press-ups, I'll get better, I'll get fitter. Or you got to do an extra hours putting. They'll go, sweet, I'll just get better at putting, that's easy. So I said to this girl, right, you've got to go out and play. And if you miss a green in regulation, which is a par 4 and 2 shots, a par 3 and 1 shot, and a par 5 and 3 shots. So first hole's a par 4. If she misses the green, as soon as you miss your first green, you have to walk home. Not from there. You have to, that's it. Your round is over. So pack your bag up and go home. And it could be 9 o'clock in the morning, and then you're not allowed to practice for the rest of that day. And she straight away went, holy shit, that's how I feel when I feel that tight and that anxious when I play. And so then you're trying to train, go out, trust your process and commit to the shot. Whereas we make training in golf so safe and so easy. And we're just going to wrap you up in cotton wool and tell you that you're just doing a lovely job and everything's going to be okay. But in actual fact, it's not what they need. Like she needs to, in this case. So as soon as I suggested it to her, you could see her go, yes, I'm playing with that same amount of fear. So imagine saying to your goal kicker, and it would, like it'd be a different thing. I think you could say to the goal kicker, I'd put the team under the goalposts at the end of training. And you could say, oh, if you miss this kick, you don't have to do any punishment, but the team's got to do something else. So when you remove the punishment from the person and someone else has to do it, I think that creates pressure. So if you said to them, you missed the kick and the team's got to do, I don't know if Henny Moores are still a thing in rugby, but like the team's got to do some shit task they don't want to do. Whereas if you said to him, if you miss the kick, you've got to do that task, he'll invariably go, oh, yeah, okay, I can accept that. But when it's your failure and someone else pays for it, it's tough. Or like in golf, just walking home. Or say to the hooker or the kicker, miss one kick. As soon as you miss, that's it, session's over. And I mean, I try to do things where I'll say to the players, in your warm-up, when you're hitting balls, I want you to save 10 balls. And I want you to leave the range on a shitter. So I want you to hit a really shit shot or, relative to their standard. And then that's it, walk to the first tee. So many of them are trying to walk to the first tee having hit a beautiful shot with all this confidence, but confidence is nothing, right? There's no, I wouldn't say there's no such thing, but your last shot on the range has no correlation with your shot on the first tee. So I want them walking off the range going, oh no, that last shot wasn't very good. I need to hit it. Then they go searching and seeking. I'll hit another one, but you don't get another chance on the first tee. So I think we need to train them to go, imagine World Cup rugby final and your kicker's doing his warm-ups and saying to him, you got to exit the ground. You got to exit your warm-up on a missed kick. And then you wouldn't do it in the World Cup. You'd obviously build up to that. So then you're training him to go, okay, it doesn't matter that I missed a kick. I'll get the next one. Whereas that we're so hell-bent on trying to wrap people in cotton wool in their training. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
No, I think I completely agree. But we tend to, we always look for how we can get that successful outcome, because I think as coaches, if we see it, then we know that we've hit our objective. But actually that's not what is designed for the player, because that player, we have to replicate pressure, because if they can cope under that pressure in an actual game, that's going to transition into hopefully a successful outcome. But we're not creative enough at how we create that pressure through what we do within our sessions. And I think that's putting that pressure on, saying, right, actually, if you don't do this, then that's going to happen. Yeah. It feels like you're going to hit them with a shit stick, but actually that's the pressure that they're going to get in the game. Like we had a situation today where we were, it was 7-5 in probably the most horrific conditions I have ever been stood on a sideline in a rugby game. And we had a penalty in front of the post with the wind to where we could have won the game, and he shanked it to the left. But actually, when he's going out there and practicing his kicking into the wind, safe, when there's no one around, there's no pressure, he thinks that his technique's fine. It's an interesting way of actually, how can we try and create that pressure in the warm-up that's going to replicate it when he gets into the game? We won the game eventually.
Yeah.
I did nail a kick from the sideline. That's baffled me. Missed it from the post, nailed it from the sideline. And it's interesting. I suppose that comes down to the type of practice that they're doing outside of the team.
And then I think as a coach, it's critical. So this almost backfired on me, mate. I was at the US Open with a young Kiwi. He was an amateur and he qualified. He won a qualifying event to qualify for the US Open, played at Pebble Beach, in a major. He teed off the 10th in the first round. I don't know how well you know Pebble Beach, but there's an ocean to the right of the 10th fairway. And you can imagine that dude's pretty nervous. He's only about 19, I think, at the time. So on the range, he hits his last drive. He doesn't hit his last drive. He's got these balls there. I'm caddying for him. And his last drive, before we go and jump into the cart to get down to the tee, he hits this bleeder that would have gone into the ocean. And so then he just turns to me, gives me his club and walks off. And I was going, oh no, you can't leave on that. That would have gone in the ocean. You need another one. And so then I caught myself going, hold on, you're the one that's told him to be doing it. But when the crunch came, I was the one that was panicking, and he didn't know this, but he just walked past me, gave me the driver, and pissed off, and then bombed it right down the middle of the 10th fairway. But I was sitting on the 10th tee, watching him going, oh God, I hope this doesn't go in the ocean. And it wasn't until after the round that I was like, mate, or after the tournament actually, I said, man, I was shitting myself on that 10th tee, because he's like, isn't that the whole point of that session? Oh, that's why he's playing and I'm not.
Have you got any other examples about how you might be able to replicate that pressure? So obviously, you've talked there and given a course example. How could you replicate that on the range? Just because obviously over here we're not blessed with some nice summer weather, winter weather, or summer weather for that matter. So the range is obviously a lot of place where people are doing some practice. How can you replicate that? If you've not got somewhere that's got like a TrackMan or a Top Golf, because they are transforming it a little bit, because they you can actually go and play 18 holes at the driving range and they replicate the movement of the ball, which is great. If you've not got access to that, how can you replicate that pressure in a safe environment?
Yeah, look, it is harder. One thing we do is so I'll have I'll give someone 30 golf balls and put a target out there. Let's say it's, the 100-meter marker, and you might hold up at arm's length, you might hold up 2 or 3 fingers and go like that to get a visual of how big a gap is. And then, like, if there are 2 targets on the range, or there's a green, then that becomes your target. And so have your 30 balls, or however many come in a bucket. If you miss your target, you have to stand behind, put your club away. And so we do this at our national camps. Put your club away and just stand there for 3 minutes. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to look at your phone. You're not allowed to do anything. Put your timer on for 3 minutes. So you just press start. That goes, and then you try again. If you miss that, you stand there for 3 minutes. And it just becomes so frustrating, because you just want to hit another one. Like, you go, oh, I just want to correct what I just did wrong. Like, we think we can just correct it. If it was that simple, you only hit a few bad shots in golf, and then once you corrected it, you'd be sweet, right? So that can be a good one, because those 30 balls can take you an hour. And I think about
half a day, I think.
Depending on how big your target is. But you get in this mindset where, like the girl, you're trying to not miss rather than trying to, like, you're just trying not to stuff up, versus what you ideally would be doing would be just to go, there's my target, fully commit, high standards, low expectations, high acceptance, and then just accept 3 minutes. Whereas what happens after you've missed a few, you just drop into this real state of fear. So I think anything you do that winds you up is beneficial, because that's, for the most part, that's the state that we start to, like, anyone can play well when they're feeling great, the sun's shining, their body feels, loose. Anyone can play well then. We want to play well. You want to be able to cope when you're not playing well. So any drills like that. So that one would be one. Any target drill you can have that you have to complete. So, might have to hit 4 shots in a row through targets, and the last shot is the hardest one, and you have to finish on that. And just keep going until you get it. Basically just anything that's going to stress the mind. If you're doing that sort of session, obviously not a technical session.
Yeah, but then that's something that I've seen. Colin Stevens, our director of rugby at work, he was a fly half, played for Wales, kicker, and he plays a lot of rugby golf with our kickers on the pitch, and he'll set different targets and set them certain amount of shots for them to get there, mainly because he knows he can set the targets and he'll probably beat them as well. but that's he's sort of trying to recreate, like you say, right? You've got 3 shots to try and get it to then replicate in some form of actually let's make it a competition and make it pressure so we can think about kicking out of hand and things like that. So there is that is a good way of sort of trying to do that. Just obviously you had Rich Masters on the Talking Forms podcast talking about going back to the implicit and explicit learning stuff. We've sort of with the Masters that me and Harrison also we touched on that quite a lot because Jamie, one of the lecturers at Leeds Beckett, worked with Rich on some of that, and it really is interesting about how you can use that to sort of bypass that working memory. Is there any way that you've tried to, since that conversation, or were you doing stuff like that beforehand that you've now implemented into your sessions as sort of that process?
Not massively. I've spent a bit of time since then. I hadn't met Rich prior to that, and he only lives. I'd heard everyone talks about him, and everyone, I don't know, people seem to love him, right? And as they should. So yeah, I hadn't met him before that, but I've spent a bit of time with him since then, and I guess spoken a little bit about some of the strategies. He talked about, I don't know if he said it on the podcast, but when he talked about counting backwards in lots of 7 from like a random number. So I've tried stuff like that where you go, righto, 2,306, and then you got to count backwards while you're executing the task. I haven't experimented a massive amount with it, but I've spent a bit of time probably talking to Rich, trying to get my head around some of that stuff.
Yeah, because he did some stuff with some NRL players where he was trying to get them to shout random things as they were passing the ball sort of between each other to really get them to bypass, actually, we catch pass. I tried it with some of our lads and they just thought I'd gone a bit mental. Because it was something completely rogue and different, but because you don't really understand until you because a lot of the stuff they've done with putting, haven't done a lot of practice in golf of sort of when we put. And it is interesting because you do find myself that when you are overthinking something, that is when you're more likely to have that poor execution. And I think it is something that if we can try and get people to do it that implicit moment, but it's quite hard to get. You've got to put a lot of time and effort in to get them to that level. I think you've probably got to start at quite a young age to embed that level of thinking that they can be able to do that.
Yeah, so he talks about that reinvestment scale, where people who are high on the reinvestment scale are more likely to choke under pressure. And then he said, this is in a chat, I don't think he said this on the podcast, we're having a coffee, and he said there's also another study that I'm not sure what the term was, but basically people who are really self-conscious when they are like dancing or something like that, they're really conscious of how they move, they're also really likely to choke under pressure, which was interesting for me to hear because I'm high on the reinvestment scale and I get so self-conscious when I dance. So it was little wonder that I stood on the first tee and couldn't move because I ticked pretty much every box that Rich had to tick in terms of choking. And then his son is actually a gun golfer. So his son plays provincial representative golf, and he's obviously never had any traditional instruction. Rich has sort of not used him as a guinea pig, but Rich has taken his beliefs on his son, and his son's a gun golfer. So as you say, probably if you're starting from any age, it's just that we're so caught up in the paradigm of what we've always done and this is how we've always done it, and whereas like some of the stuff that he believes in and has, like he'll say, I've got everything I say is backed by research. So he's not making anything up or opinion based stuff.
Well, that's what I think. Like you say, sports and coaching, and even like some aspects of teaching, it's they'll stick to, teachers and coaches will stick to what they know, and and that's probably the issue, not necessarily the issue, but the most difficult thing for academics coming into a coaching world is changing mindsets and trying to get coaches to almost experiment a little bit more with their craft to hone it. So I think this idea of more implicit and for us, we spoke on in the last episode, the kind of game-based stuff is kind of new, and it's the new wave, especially coming across in the UK and governing bodies, not just in rugby but the FA and football. They're trying to promote this more implicit game-based learning. How have you kind of felt? How have you felt trying to adapt in these new ways of the academic research, the academics coming to assist you? And have you been open with open arms, or have you been a little bit reticent yourself?
I think it's really interesting place. Like so Ed Coghlan, or Coghlan, not sure how to say his surname. So I chat with him a little bit. He's obviously ecological dynamics and fully down that phase. And I think it's all really interesting. I just want to go back to something before about some of that Rich Masters stuff. There's two things, like errorless learning, I think would be one thing that I think you can use in golf quite successfully. But also we've got this paradigm of not only the coach's paradigm, but the person who's paying. In my industry, I'm not employed by a club, say. I'm employed by a person who's paying me money to tell them something. And sometimes that's hard to go, I'm just going to let you explore and learn. They just want to, they want explicit stuff because they've just paid you. They don't want to find the answer out for themselves. So there's that paradigm as well, I think, that's a challenge. But yeah, in terms of the academic stuff, the people that I've enjoyed speaking to, like Ed, I think is really practical. He's open. He helps me get my head around stuff. Damien Farrow would be another one from Australia, who I think's got a beautiful balance of academia, and I think Australians, hopefully there's no Australians listening, but it pains me to say this, but I think they do a really lovely job of simplifying stuff. Like Damien just makes really highly technical stuff just sound so, and you listen to him and think, oh yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. Why didn't I think of that? And I think the best, the best academics are quite open to helping. Like Rich, I think even on the podcast said, look, I'm an academic, I'm in the lab. Like I'm actually really not even interested in what happens out there because that's not my jam. And there is that bit of, I've got to bring this to life though. But I think most of them are pretty open. And I think a lot of them aren't, well, there's some of them that are pretty dogmatic. Hey, this is the way, this is the way, this is the light. You have to do it this way. And I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Well, Rich Smith touched on that as well. He said he loves a model. He loves a model.
That's right.
How you actually apply it. And that is the key thing. It's actually, and I think this is where I benefited going back into education after coaching for 10 years, is when I was learning and being about the different theories and concepts that the lecturers were going on about, I was actually thinking, well, how does that apply to me? What from my experiences can I take away from that and put into my own environments? When actually I think some of the students that go straight from undergrad to masters to then employment, they struggle to make the connections because they're just looking at the theory all the time. When actually the best way you could learn is you've got to go out, learn your trade, come back and then go, oh, that's that. Because I thought I really understood rugby and then went on the masters and went, I was just scratching the surface. I'd just not covered half the stuff that the academic side had done. I just gone from what the RFU had told me, this is what we do. We then transformed how I then went about and did it.
I was just going to say, I think you see that in golf. People learning golf, they learn on the driving range, and it's not until you get on the course they're like, oh, that's why we were hitting this shot. Whereas if you did it the reverse, took them on the course, showed them this is what can happen, then next time you go and do a chipping lesson, like you need your chip to go high so it gets over the bunker. Remember when we were on the third hole last week and you couldn't, oh yeah, okay, sweet. And so it's that, I get now how the application applies to me rather than just a general concept.
Yeah, just making the connections. So obviously you've been running the Talking Performance podcast did you start that in lock? I only came across it last year. When you fully started it.
Lockdown 2020, I think we started.
Me and Harrison had the same idea, stuff to keep us busy and keep us learning. What's been the biggest thing sort of you've learned from it and taken away from it? And is that why you started it, just to keep yourself sort of learning and developing? Because you had a bit more of a harsher lockdown than we did to some extent. But what's been the biggest learning from it, would you say?
Yeah, there's probably a few levels. I mean, the initial start was the guy that I did it with, David Galbraith, I think is a genius. And he's not on social media. He's not a self-promoter. For years, I've called him the ghost in the machine, as in everyone in high performance sport New Zealand, if you mention his name, they're like, oh, DG, he's a legend. But nobody outside of that industry knows him. We actually, I'm in Auckland today, which is not where I live, but we had a staff day for Golf New Zealand, all of our staff, like 50 people, and we had DG present for 4 hours. And for some of those people, it's like, whoa, this is freaky shit. So my first motivator was because I'd talk to him every week, and I just think, man, like, I get to talk to you every week. The whole anyone who wants to should be part of these conversations. Like, he's got so much good shit. I just wanted to share it. So we were probably just bored over lockdown, and I was like, why don't we do a podcast? He goes, yeah, we'll do it live. And I went, no. He's like, yeah, we'll do it live and we'll start tonight. So he's shaped pretty much all of my coaching beliefs. And he said, yeah, we'll do it live. That way there's pressure. And anyway, so we did them live for ages. In fact, this year's I've stopped doing them live because it's harder to manage time with the world sort of getting back to normal a bit. So yeah, the first motivator was just to get him out, his knowledge out there. And then Wayne Smith, the ex All Black coach, has been my mentor for probably over 10 years now. And that came about through DG. So he said to me one day, you need to get a mentor. And I bandied a few names about in golf, and he would say, how well do you know them? And I'd go, yeah, I know them well. And he'd go, no, it has to be someone that would scare you, like someone that you'd go, holy shit. And I thought, well, golf, New Zealand's small, golf's small. That person probably doesn't exist. So then I just thought, I'll tell you what, I'll email Wayne Smith. And I wrote, he was working at the Chiefs at the time, and I just wrote to, support@chiefs.com type email and said, hey, look, really want a mentor. I'd love Wayne Smith to be my mentor. Appreciate you probably get messages like this all the time. If you don't pass it on, totally understand. If you do, that'd be cool. And I thought, sweet, job done. I've asked a mentor. He won't get back to me, but I can say to DG, it wasn't my fault. Next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, an email comes in from Wayne Smith. Oh, hey, Jay. Great to hear from you. Yep, I'd love to help, mate. Bring your stuff over to Cambridge on Friday morning. I'll meet you at 7 o'clock at this cafe. And I just thought, holy shit, I've got no stuff. I don't even know what I'm doing. What am I doing? And so obviously that sparked that. And then, so he's been awesome for my development. So DG and Smithy, ironically, not golf, but they've had the biggest influence on my coaching. And so then for the third episode, we were chatting and we were like, why don't we get Smithy on? Because people will want to hear from him. And so then we got him on. And then I guess from there, it just flowed. I think what I've found so far, I probably shouldn't share my goal because it's too easy now for someone, but my goal now is to ask somebody that says no, because everyone I've asked to come on my podcast has said yes. And I kind of think, like, there's people on there for the most part, like obviously I knew Smithy and then I knew the first few, but since then there's been people that I don't know and I've thought, there's no way they're going to say yes. And then they go, yeah, happy to. And you think, oh, wicked. And, selfishly, I get to talk to someone for an hour or so every week. If I rang them and said, hey, can I have a yarn on Thursday night for an hour? They'll go, no. Like, I don't even know who you are. But when it's a podcast and I've got like Cody Royal, who I reached out to, like, I don't know Cody Royal, but I've listened to his stuff and I've read his books. And I was like, oh, he'll be cool. Yep. He said, yep. And we were chatting, I think, before the podcast. And it's like, you get an hour of someone's best because they want to present good as well. So you're getting your question. So like your own PD just goes through the roof. And it was probably RJ actually that he, unbeknown to him, but probably got me back on track. So he said, I'd have a list of questions, and then what I found was I didn't really listen. I wasn't really completely listening to the answer because I was thinking about the next question. And DG, he was working up in Japan, so it was too hard for him to carry on with me. So it was just me. Normally, if I didn't have a question, I'd just throw it at DG and he could take something. And then the safety net in me went, I need to have a list of questions in case I stall or I choke or something happens. But RJ said, just have one question and listen and see where it goes. And I was like, yeah, good idea. I didn't do it for the first few after that because it was still a bit, holy shit, that's a bit brave. That's like if you miss the screen, you got to go home. So because if you've got one question and you stuff it up, you're like, oh no, where to? But since then, I literally have just gone with, I probably go with a theme rather than a question. And then I just think, right, I just want to see where this takes me. And so I went through phases of trying to do what I think people wanted to hear. And then in the end, I just went, oh, you know what? I just got to do what interests me, because if it interests me, I will ask better questions, and that tends to be the ones that I get the better feedback from. But some of the people, Mike Rogers, he coaches the New England Free Jacks at the moment over in the US, but he coached Bay of Plenty Steamers over here, and the Waikato Women's NPC team that won last year. Like having him on was brilliant. Like if you haven't had him on, you should get him on. He's some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth. So he's been awesome for my development. So it's sometimes these, like Smithy was great and always is. And, but sometimes it's the random, not that Mike's random. If you listen, sorry, Mike, if you're listening to this, you're outstanding and I love you like a brother, but like they give you some of the gold and it makes you reflect on your own. You hear things and think.
Yes, we found that with season 2. So season 2, we just started reaching out to top coaches, and I think the one that kind of caught us by surprise is we managed to get Alison Annan on, who is head coach of the Netherlands women hockey. She literally just won gold medal at the Olympics. And I think both Kris and I were sat there chatting away with her for an hour. Once again, similar to you, we kind of, when first season 1 of the podcast, we had questions written down, and we were, we wanted to come across as two amateurs looking professional. But then actually, we found that like we've done today is open up the floor, have a bunch of questions, and then we were just absolutely bewildered and stunned by some of the areas we were talking with Alison, and I think that's why we've kind of done it with you today. And you go back to listening. I think I remember chatting with an academic at Leeds Beckett where we both worked, a name called Bob Muir, and he talked about listening, and there were 4 types of listening. And we can listen to listen with the intent to answer, or the last one he said was just listening, and that's kind of the most powerful way of actually communicating. If we just sit back and listen and then respond, it makes it so much more free flowing. And actually, like today, we can take away loads, and it's been a cracking conversation.
It's hard too when you get questions in your head and you're like, oh, don't forget that. Rich Masters probably kill me, but don't forget that, and you're trying to hang on to stuff, then I forget.
It was Richard Smith's, but his was the first one that we did with no structure at all. It was actually both our favourite one. And then after that, it's kind of snowballed it. It's like, right, what should we start to kick it off as the first question? And then we just go from that. And it's amazing that, like I say, one of the main reasons me and Harrison started this, same reason sort of what you said, is what can I learn from this? What can we take away that's going to make us better, as well as if people listen, great. We thought we'd just be our parents to start with, but even they don't listen anyway, so it doesn't make a difference.
And it's random who does listen too, eh?
Yeah, well, I was up in Scotland for a game before Christmas, and my coach went, "Oh, do you have a YouTube? Yeah. Do you have a podcast? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm listening. It's good. I'm really taking a lot away." I was like, "Oh, I'm a fan."
Yeah.
We get t-shirts and mugs out there.
Where do I sign? Where do you want me to sign?
Yeah. Have you got any big players lined up, or any like dream guests that you'd love to get?
I'd love to, if we could get Eddie Johns on. I think that will be great to sort of listen to what he's got to say about stuff. And he is quite good at he has done quite a lot of stuff in the past as well.
Yeah.
It'd be good to get him on. We had Frank Dick on, who he came on in the last season, which was really good because he's worked with some unbelievable athletes, and sort of tapping into his knowledge was, well, I think he kind of flipped on his head, didn't he, with start asking those questions, and then you find yourself reflecting, and you went, actually, I thought I was interviewing you, and now we're going to head.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a tough one to edit, that Frank Dick one, because he just caught us off guard by asking us. It basically became a coach education session, and it turned it on us, and I'm just shell shocked that this guy who's got years and years and years of elite performance experience just kind of put me on the spot, and I didn't know that was an odd experience.
Yeah, I've had a couple that do that, ask questions like, "Whoa, this is not what this is about. I'm not ready for this." Yeah.
So what you said though with Wayne Smith, when he said, "I'll bring you stuff," I haven't got any stuff. I'm not prepared. What do I do? That question. No, I'm not ready for it. I'm a bit of a planner like that. But no, Jay, it's been great having you on. I've written down loads of stuff, and I think there's lots of bits there that we can take away and put in, I think, into team sports. That's what I was really interested in, is actually team sports work there. And there is a lot of individual elements that make the team sport successful. Just like an example you said with cricket. Yeah, it's a team sport, but actually it's the individual technique of batting and bowling. How do we merge them two together? And I definitely think that's something that I needed to work on. I'm very good at the team-based, game-based stuff, but individual tech stuff is stuff that I definitely needed to work on. There's some great elements there that I'll probably take away and start putting into my planning and start implementing in. So thanks very much for coming on and giving up your time.
Too easy. Thanks for having me.
Another great chat there, Harrison, with Jay on activity structure within individual sports. I took a lot out of that. What was what was the key thing you took away from it?
Oh no, loads. I think both you and I, as soon as you came off the chat, thought that we could carry on for another good few hours, just chewing the fat, or as he would say, having a yarn. As it was brilliant, and I think there's so much. I think if I'm being totally honest, I was probably a little bit worried when we were going in, because you and I have a team sport background. This is very much everything we've done on the podcast so far has very much been related to team sport, and having someone on with with very much an individual sport background. I thought I was a little bit worried how would it fit within the series, but God, there's plenty in which coaches can take away from a team sport environment. I thought.
I really liked his comparison though to the individual sport to a team sport, with an example of cricket, where yes, it's a team sport, but it's got a lot of individual outcomes within it, and that is interesting, because it is the same. If you break down rugby, you've still got your line out, your kick in, as examples for real individual elements that can have a huge impact on the game. Because if you throw ins off and you're not winning your line out, you're not going to be able to build your own ball. So it is interesting how you could still take. I took a lot from that of what I could take into my own sessions, focused on them technical bits, and that was sort of I found that one of the reasons to get someone like that on, and I definitely found that beneficial from his whole. I find from something like, let's talk goal kicking or throwing as an example again, the pressure that players put on themselves in a game. So they'll slot everything in training, they'll do absolutely brilliant, and then they'll even before the game, they'll hit everything from halfway line, touch line, where there's no pressure. But as soon as that pressure's on and it's against them, then that's when technique and stuff goes out the window. And I really liked his, the low expectation, high standards, high acceptance, but then also how you can try and focus on that and replicate pressure within your training. Little bits of, if you don't get this kick, everyone else is running.
Yeah.
This is something different like that, when you'd always I think we always try to put some, I know I've been guilty of it, where you're looking at trying to replicate pressure and you end up wanting to, you maybe put them under fatigue to see if they could then execute it under pressure. When actually, no, it's how can they calm themselves, relax themselves to replicate that pressure.
Well, yeah, but like, he hit the nail on the head when he gave his example of, when he stepped up to on the first fairway of his golf and he froze. That's not under fatigue. That's the mental stresses that we put on ourselves. And and as this is you and I both played, and we still get it as coaches that we feel pressure, and if we can replicate that within training environments to how it marries up into a game environment, then surely the player is going to benefit. If we can create match day experiences, match day environments in training with the same varying amounts of pressure, they're going to benefit. And but I think what's important to note is there is a time and a place. So if the player doesn't have 100%, the player doesn't understand the technical model of the skill, then there's no point putting it under massive amount of pressure. I did like his, I did like his, what he was saying around, you put them under pressure, or you make them find it. The best players will typically find another way to be able to hit the outcome. And I think that's where it's probably quite beneficial for us as grassroots coaches. Is that you don't actually have to have a solid understanding of the technical aspects of everything, but if you vary the levels of pressure, or make it more outcome based, and and change that level of pressure, then the best players typically will manage to find an outcome, whether that be 100% the best way technically, but everything in rugby is outcome based.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's what we always judge our success on, especially with some of these things. Another bit that I found really interesting is the element from talking about something like golf, and as a golf coach, that the different variation in how you might sometimes coach. So how there's some coaches out there that feel that because you're being paid to deliver that service, that you want to be told the answer rather than actually discovering it for yourself. I mean, that's quite interesting that we do, especially when we're doing games, we're encouraging decision making. But actually, when it comes to some of them technical elements, do we just need to be a little bit more direct? We need to use a little bit more tell, or how we found that balance with showing a video, getting them to identify. But if they don't know what they're looking for in the first place, what's the point in using the video? You see what I'm saying? It's an interesting way of, do we fully understand the technical model that we're trying to put out to then massively to give that player the understanding of when they're going out, what they're doing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's got to be a balance. So, certainly that I've started doing as a coach, that there are times in which players will come and ask me questions, and I don't know the answer. So if I need to have one of those, off the cuff sessions in which they just go and practice it without a strong technical model, because I'm thinking on the fly, and that gives me enough time to then go and watch hours of YouTube videos of how to perform the skill in terms of maybe it's like ball throw, like throwing it a line out, right, ball placement, what they're doing with their hands, but I think if we want almost like a filler session, really, isn't it, in terms of, right, let's see if we can work on hitting the outcome, and then I then say, oh look, then have we tried layering on these technical elements that I might have gone home and researched in that time off. Yeah, but then it's interesting. I guess it is a balance. It is a balance between how well that technical model and actually encouraging. Like, do you have to be, a question for you, Chris, do you have to be the all well-rounded coach that knows every technical aspect of your sport to be able to help someone with the skill acquisition of learning skills?
I'm not convinced that exists. I don't think any coach, whatever level, can say that they have a full technical understanding of every element of the game. Otherwise, that's why you bring in other specialists. That's why, if you go back, I've rewatched recently the documentary on Netflix of the 2003 World Cup at Jerusalem, and the level of detail that Woodward went to with just even appointing a hand-eye coordination coach to look at to help improve visual awareness and catch pass and go into that level of detail to get that extra 1%. So there'll always be someone, I think, that knows more than you. You've just got to have that trust to bring them in. And that kind of links up to one other bit that I wanted to touch on that isn't necessarily related to activity structure within team sports, but I think it was an interesting point, was how when Jay went out and got a mentor, and his advice that he was given was find a mentor that scares you. Because that's what's going to push you. That's what's going to help you be better in trying to find them uncomfortable elements that you need to learn. Because I think we are guilty with staying quite safe.
Oh,
And you do need that person that's going to give you a kick a little bit and push you to be more comfortably uncomfortable.
but this is what I've always challenged to coaches whenever we've had these kind of discussions: is us as coaches want to push the players out of their comfort zone in order for them to learn and grow as players. So why aren't we doing that as coaches? Why aren't we getting other coaches, even if it's just another coach, two assistant coaches working, like, can I get, can we push ourselves out of our comfort zone and ask questions, put us on the spot, make us uncomfortable to really make us learn and thrive as and develop as coaches? Because if we're going to ask our players to do it, why aren't we doing it?
I think we've got a whole episode on that we could maybe run ourselves, because I think that is an interesting thing for us to maybe look at. Yeah, I took loads from Jay there. It's made me think a little bit more about when I'm going to go and do these technical type of tasks for players, how I might approach the activity structure. Because I think I've very much gone through reps rather than, it's. He described it as rep without rep. So there's always that element of task and time, and the activity that you're doing is replicating to what you're going to do rather than just aimless throwing.
Well, it goes back to what you're saying around perceptual cues. So what we perceive are the main threats, or the the main threats to that will affect the outcome of the skill. So like you said, right, we can go on the driving range and we can hit balls over and over again. But actually, whenever you're playing golf, there's so many other things you need to think about. The wind, or there's the bunker over there. His example of working with that young New Zealand golfer who had the sea down the side. They're all perceptual cues that we all might interpret differently. But until you're in that pressure zone, then you're never going to get it. So look, there was plenty in that episode that we can digest, we can discuss, and and if anyone else has picked up anything, please feel free to share.
Definitely. We are back in 2 weeks with, I'm not exaggerating this, probably my favourite interview so far. So stay tuned and listen out for that. Charlie's got all of our social media details at the end, and we will see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.